General Hospital spoilers reveal that Curtis's decision to betray Nina by revealing her affair with Drew to Willow didn't simply blow the lid off a secret, it detonated an emotional bomb in the heart of Port Charles. In a moment that will be remembered as a turning point. Curtis sacrificed years of friendship and trust for what he believed was a higher cause, to protect Portia and expose the corruption fueling Drew's rise. When he walked into Willow's bridal suite that day, his confession hit harder than any accusation. Nina, the woman who had endured years of separation and built her renewed maternal bond from scratch, was not the symbol of redemption Willow thought she was. She was complicit in Drew's manipulations. For Willow, this revelation wasn't just shocking, it was world-shattering. The man she loved, Drew, was not only unfaithful but capable of orchestrating schemes to control every aspect of her life, including custody of her children. And behind the scenes, Nina had turned a blind eye to this while cloaking it in secrets and lies. The wedding ceremony collapsed before it began. Guests were left speechless. The chapel fell silent in disbelief. The once hopeful atmosphere replaced by palpable tension. Willow's response was nothing short of cathartic. The gentle bride became a fierce storm in heels. She refused to be the quiet victim of betrayal a second time. Her voice, usually soft and reasoned, transformed into a sharpened blade, cutting through all facades. She confronted Drew first, calling him out for his calculated cruelty, for using Portia and fabricating narratives to strip Michael of his reputation, for treating her like a pawn in his political agenda. Her questions weren't polite, they were relentless. How could you fake my love? Fake my consent? Build a future on control and theft? Then she turned on Nina, whose tears and pleas were too little, too late. You sold me out to protect him, Willow accused, her voice cracking with the weight of a wound freshly healed, or torn anew. Pain, anger, and a raw sense of loss bled into her words. You spent years searching for me, only to trade me for his secrets. Their mother-daughter reunion, once hailed as a triumph of reconciliation, unraveled in real time, exposing both the fragility of familial bonds and the ferocity of Willow's self-preservation. Curtis watched from the threshold, unable to retreat from the consequences of his confession. He'd hoped this moment could free Willow from manipulation. But in that blaze of anger and heartbreak, he realized just how deep the damage had gone. Drew was no longer an ally, Nina was no longer a safe harbor, and Portia had been dragged deeper into chaos. There's no restoration from moments like these, only new paths forward. The fallout spread outward quickly. Michael, once unfairly defamed, was vindicated amidst social media uproar. Portia, whose medical license was nearly at stake, found unexpected allies offering emotional and legal support. The Aurora media smear campaign against Sonny collapsed under scrutiny, revealing Drew's fingerprints on the conspiracy. With every fragment of truth Curtis revealed, the city reeled, the narrative shifting from a wedding drama to a full-blown scandal. Meanwhile, Willow's fury turned inward. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking change. A break from every man and woman who had ever told her what to think, who had ever shaped her world in secret. She spent days in silence, isolating herself in her home, avoiding calls from Drew, from Nina, from anyone associated with the tragedy. When she finally emerged, it was not as the bride she once planned to be, but as a woman in control of her own story. She banned Drew from her life, severed business ties with Nina, and filed formal complaints against those who had participated in the defamation and medical conspiracies. She leaned on Portia, who, despite being ensnared in Drew's schemes, never betrayed Willow. She leaned on Scout, seeking comfort in innocent presence. And when she finally spoke publicly, her words were more powerful than any vows. I will not be someone's plan. I will not be molded or manipulated. I will be me. As for Drew, he sank into darkness. His political ambitions died that day. He's become a pariah, with former allies distancing themselves and the community judging him for using children, doctors, legal systems, and relationships to orchestrate his rise. Nina, heartbroken and humiliated, retreated into grief, grappling with self-loathing and guilt for betraying her daughter. Curtis and Portia are rebuilding their relationship, scarred by conflict but strengthened by each other's courage. They've joined Willow in a small circle of truth, becoming the nucleus of a new alliance that promises genuine support and protection for the sake of Wiley and Amelia. Their shared trauma has made them a force of unity, rather than division. In the end, what began as a shocking confession became the catalyst for something more profound: accountability, transparency, and the reclaiming of identity. Willow's rage was born of betrayal, but it became the foundation of rebirth. Curtis sacrificed friendship for truth. Nina received heartbreak instead of reconciliation. Drew lost everything he had built. This was no longer a story of love. It was a story of autonomy. A story of pain becoming power. Of lies collapsing into light. And of a woman who refused to be the hero, the bride, or the victim, choosing instead to be the author of her own destiny. From the ashes of disaster, something new began, and Port Charles would never be the same again. ChatGPT de NOI. Curtis's transformation from steady moral compass to orchestrator of a high-stakes takedown has reshaped the emotional epicenter of Port Charles, igniting a cascade of cascading revelations, ruthless confrontations, and shifting alliances. What began as a personal vendetta to protect Portia has grown into a full-scale crusade, a war not just against one man, but against every illusion that has kept Drew's facade intact for far too long. Curtis is no longer playing defense, he's setting the battlefield. And every move he makes recalibrates the rules of engagement in ways that could reshape the entire town. It started quietly. The subtle manipulation of medical files. The orchestration of a damaging media hit on Sunny. The pressure of custody battles. Each plot point added weight to a mounting mountain of suspicion that Curtis could no longer ignore. When Portia's license hovered on the brink of ruin as she was forced into unethical acts, that became Curtis's point of no return. He realized Drew wasn't just abusing his political ambition, he was weaponizing Portia's love and loyalty to control everything around him, from the media narrative to Michael's reputation. For Curtis, it was bigger than betrayal, it was a crime, a betrayal of trust and power abused on a scale he once never imagined. What Curtis has become is a strategist, a coalition builder, and a hunter in a world that pushed him into the shadows. He's leveraging connections with Aurora media executives who've grown suspicious of orchestrated campaigns. He's quietly aligning with hospital insiders who question the sudden flurry of legal requests targeting Michael and Michael's team. He's digging into court documents, security footage, and Cassidy-era secrets more clandestine than history itself. Most of all, he's rallying his own moral code, not one of blind justice, but of ruthless accountability. It's this transformation that terrifies Port Charles. Dr. Audrey, the once trusted figure of calm, now watches Curtis walk the line between hero and vigilante. Jordan is torn, struggling to reconcile the man she loves with the path he's chosen, one that may cost him everything. Even Portia, fragile from recent trauma, has confronted him in a private moment, accusing him of becoming the very type of man he's accusing Drew of being. But Curtis's retort is chillingly calm. Sometimes the darkness is all that can find the truth. And the deeper he digs, the more explosive things become. Whispers swirl that he's uncovered recordings from Cassadine Island, confessions, coded triggers, behavioral evidence suggesting Drew's conditioning was never fully erased. If true, it changes everything. It redefines the failed hero narrative, reveals Willow's entanglement as not just personal, but psychological, and proves Drew's entire crusade has been built on shaky moral footing. The ramifications stretch further, custody disputes turn into legal warfare. Media spins into exposed territory, and political strategists begin whispering about charges, investigations, perhaps even criminal trials. Curtis is methodical, but not neutral. He speaks out to lawmakers and judges, using fact and fury with equal force. He hires a private investigator. He mends fences with Sunny, aware that if Sunny steps in to support Michael or lend public credibility, the entire narrative shifts. He even meets with people like Liesel and Nina in secret. All separately, to cross-check stories and verify that what he's seeing isn't a fragmented puzzle, but a complete picture of manipulation, abuse, and cover-up. This crescendo of movement has not gone unnoticed. Drew, sensing the shift, moves into defense mode, deploying political allies, sending warnings to his contacts, attempting to smear anyone who speaks against him. But Curtis is 4 moves ahead. He fights back not with emotional pleas, but with documentation, sworn statements, and the kind of legal precision Drew never saw coming. He's tapped into Willow's legal team and built a fortress around Michael, preparing to strike where it hurts, in court, in public opinion, in custody decisions. He's no longer alone. Portia's quiet legal counsel, Britt's shadow influence in legal circles, all are converging. Curtis's hard pivot has triggered a fracturing of alliances. Molly sees him as reckless, Nina as traitorous. Spencer and Trina worry Drew is about to retaliate. Nosy insiders are beginning to threaten Curtis's safety, unmarked cars, coded threats scribbled on letters. But Curtis, once known for his even temperament, now embraces instincts that made him dangerous. He talks publicly about protecting the truth. But everyone hears the stakes, he's ready for Drew to fall. The change in Curtis isn't just a character arc, it's a systemic upheaval. It represents the way one person's refusal to accept wrongdoing can tear through institutions, question family ties, and force communities to confront rot within powerful structures. It's rewriting the rules of drama. Politics and family no longer exist in separate spheres. Legal hearings now play out like courtroom thrillers. Media coverage becomes character development. Relationships are no longer healed in whispered conversations, they break in supernova revelations and public record. As rumors swirl of possible arrests, election fallout, and psychological testing for Drew, Curtis stands at the center, not as the man bent on revenge, but as the man determined to drag an unchecked system into the light. He knows the cost. Nina's friendship may be gone, Portia's stability may be threatened, Jordan's safety may be in question. But he believes the cost of silence was always greater. In the weeks to come, Curtis's crusade will not just expose Drew, it will redefine Port Charles's definition of power, justice, and accountability. And no matter how it ends, it will mark the rise of a radically different Curtis Ashford, no longer just a man of principle, but a reckoning for sins that once hid behind charisma and ambition. The man who set this war in motion doesn't just want to win, he wants to do what no one thought possible, tear down the illusions that allowed a monster to thrive. Scout and Curtis have become unlikely allies in a rapidly intensifying psychological battle against Drew and Nina, with Willow caught squarely in the eye of the storm. As more unsettling truths come to light, particularly those unearthed by Curtis and quietly confirmed by Scout's observations and private accounts, Willow begins to confront a reality she has long avoided. The woman who once stood loyally beside Drew, defending him through controversies and moral compromise, is now beginning to recoil from the darkness that has slowly swallowed him, and perhaps even parts of herself. But it is not just Drew she will turn against. Nina, her mother by blood and now perceived by Willow as complicit in the spiral of manipulation and secrecy, will also face the full weight of Willow's awakening. This shift is not subtle. It is seismic, driven by the slow erosion of trust, love, and logic. Curtis's revelations about Drew's abuses, political coercion, medical file tampering, and the orchestrated effort to paint Michael as an unfit parent, have unsettled Willow's fragile emotional foundation. But it is Scout, young yet sharply intuitive, who triggers Willow's deepest doubts. Scout, who once saw Willow as a calming maternal presence, now speaks with haunted clarity about Drew's recent behavior and the way Nina has begun to influence him behind closed doors. She tells Willow things a child shouldn't know, stories about overheard threats, whispered bribes, and the eerie way Drew talks about control and correction. It is Scout's fear, so raw and unfiltered, that finally breaks through Willow's carefully maintained denial. The confrontation is inevitable. Willow, Standing in her bridal suite with her reflection staring back like a stranger, decides she cannot go through with the wedding. Her mind spins with Curtis's warning. That continuing this charade means enabling a dangerous game that puts Michael, Wiley, and Amelia at risk. Her chest tightens with Scout's quiet plea, "Please don't let him hurt anyone else." Willow no longer sees Drew as her protector. She sees him as the architect of a crumbling tower of lies. And Nina, for all her longing to be a mother, has aligned herself with Drew in ways that are no longer excusable. To Willow, this isn't about misunderstandings or misplaced trust, it's about betrayal wrapped in maternal pretense. The decision to walk away is not peaceful. It is explosive. Just moments before the ceremony, Willow gathers her courage and emerges to face a room filled with guests, a groom, and a mother waiting for a symbolic unity that will never happen. Her voice, once soft, now cuts like steel as she publicly denounces the manipulation, the lies, and the games. She accuses Drew of trying to rewire her life for his ambition and power. She turns to Nina and accuses her of enabling that control, of using motherhood as a shield for deceit. The guests gasp. Drew stiffens. Nina goes pale. And Willow, trembling but fierce, walks away, not from love, but from the illusion of it. This decision fractures everything. Curtis watches from the sidelines, prepared for fallout but stunned by the strength of Willow's defiance. Scout, clutching a small bouquet meant for the wedding, watches with a mix of sadness and pride. This is not a wedding day. It is a declaration of war. Willow's action sparks immediate retaliation from Drew, who vows to fight for the children, for the narrative, and for his public image. Nina tries to salvage what she can, pleading with Willow in private to understand, to forgive. But the damage is too deep. What follows is a mother-daughter standoff that rocks Port Charles. Willow, for the first time, sets boundaries that cannot be crossed. She demands distance, truth, and accountability. Nina, devastated and confused, reverts to old tactics, emotional appeals, guilt, veiled threats, only to find Willow unmoved. The once tenuous bond built after years of estrangement is now severed by the blade of disillusionment. Curtis, meanwhile, begins building a broader case, rallying allies in the hospital, at the courthouse, and among those harmed by Drew's rising empire. Scout, despite her age, becomes a reluctant symbol of truth, a reminder that even children see through deception when no one else will. The consequences ripple outward. Michael steps into the chaos to support Willow, reigniting his own conflicts with Nina and Drew. Portia faces backlash for her part in enabling the medical manipulation, even if she did so under duress. Sonny, from the sidelines, watches the implosion of alliances he once counted on. The city becomes a pressure cooker of broken loyalties and simmering rage. But it is Willow who emerges transformed. No longer the quiet schoolteacher turned mother seeking peace in every direction, she is now a woman carved by betrayal, driven by clarity, and emboldened by righteous fury. Her war with Drew and Nina is no longer emotional, it is strategic, legal, and deeply personal. She files for sole custody, she seeks legal protection, and she takes control of her narrative. No longer a puppet to be pulled by family ties or romantic illusions, Willow becomes a new force in Port Charles, one that no one saw coming. The chaos ignited by Curtis and Scout's truths, and cemented by Willow's defiance, has redefined the battlefield. Relationships are dissolving. Power is shifting. And amidst the ash of what was supposed to be a celebration, a new legacy is being written, one where silence is no longer survival, and truth, however painful, is the only path forward. Curtis is becoming the new primary target in a dangerous and escalating war orchestrated by Drew and Nina. A revelation that signals one of the most perilous shifts in the power dynamics of Port Charles. What once began as a subtle unraveling of secrets has now exploded into a volatile campaign of retaliation, with Curtis positioned at the center of their wrath. His decision to expose the hidden affair between Drew and Nina, especially during the emotionally charged lead-up to Drew's wedding with Willow, was seen not as an act of honesty but as a declaration of betrayal. For Drew, who has carefully constructed a narrative of respectability and moral reform, Curtis's interference is nothing short of a strategic threat. And for Nina, who has spent years attempting to rebuild her image and repair fractured relationships, particularly with Willow, this public humiliation is unforgivable. The danger brewing against Curtis is not just reputational, it is tactical and deeply personal. Drew, who is no stranger to leveraging political, legal, and medical influence, begins setting traps meant to isolate Curtis. Whispers about Curtis's past begin to surface, about questionable deals during his time in law enforcement, about old connections to organized crime, and even unconfirmed speculation about his loyalty to his family. These rumors don't come from nowhere, they're seeded with intent. Drew uses his contacts within Aurora Media to begin reshaping the public image of Curtis as unstable, vengeful, and potentially dangerous. Nina, meanwhile, begins to subtly undermine Curtis's connections in the hospital, implying to Portia's superiors and hospital board members that Curtis's emotional state is interfering with her judgment and duties. These quiet campaigns are meant to wear Curtis down, piece by piece, turning allies into skeptics and family into liabilities. But Curtis is not unaware. He anticipated backlash, though perhaps not at this scale or intensity. The calculated coldness in Drew's eyes and the venom masked behind Nina's saccharine smiles have only confirmed that his choice to speak up was necessary. Still, the pressure is immense. Portia, caught in the crossfire, feels her professional integrity slipping through her fingers as whispers of malpractice begin to circulate, whispers Drew helped fuel after Curtis's confession. Even at home, tension brews. There are late-night arguments, emotional breakdowns, and moments where Portia wonders if Curtis's need to expose the truth was worth the destruction it's now inviting into their lives. The attack becomes physical when Curtis discovers that his car's brake line was tampered with, an event initially dismissed as mechanical failure until a private investigation reveals it was intentional. This shocking escalation confirms what Curtis feared: this is no longer just a social or professional war. It's a personal vendetta, and his life is now at risk. Scout, overhearing part of a conversation between Nina and an unknown man on the phone, shares with Willow that something about Drew's behavior has become erratic and increasingly vengeful. Willow, already shaken by the collapse of her relationship and trust in both Drew and Nina, begins to believe Curtis. But even she cannot stop the momentum now. Curtis is forced into a corner, deciding whether to retreat for safety or go public with everything: documents, recordings, and testimonies that prove just how far Drew and Nina have gone to maintain their facade and retaliate against threats. He chooses the latter, organizing a press briefing under the guise of exposing institutional corruption at Aurora, but cleverly planting breadcrumbs about Drew's actions to bait the media. The city begins to whisper not about Curtis the traitor, but about Drew the manipulator, and Nina the schemer. The tide begins to shift. But retaliation is a two-way street. As Curtis becomes more aggressive in defending himself, he risks becoming what Drew accuses him of: obsessed, dangerous, and unpredictable. Friends like Jordan begin to worry. Even allies such as Sunny start to pull away, unsure if aligning with Curtis is worth the blowback. Drew uses every opportunity to paint Curtis as an unhinged man who's letting personal bitterness cloud his judgment. Nina doubles down, feigning public sympathy while fueling quiet campaigns to discredit Curtis's mental health. They begin planting the idea that Curtis might be suffering from PTSD, referencing past traumas from his police days and the recent stress on his marriage. And still, Curtis refuses to break. He begins to gather witnesses, calling upon those Drew has wronged and silenced: minor employees at Aurora, former political associates, even a few medical staff who've overheard conversations about tampered files. The deeper Curtis digs, the more dangerous the situation becomes. An anonymous warning arrives at his door one night. A red envelope with nothing inside but a tarot card, the same kind Drew once used during his own rumored brainwashing. Curtis knows now that they are toying with fear, with symbolism, with intimidation. But instead of being scared, He's more determined than ever to expose what lies beneath the polished veneers of Drew and Nina's public personas. As Port Charles watches the once respected Curtis teeter between hero and target, the question becomes not just whether he can survive Drew and Nina's wrath, but whether anyone in this town can afford to remain silent. The war is no longer about romance or betrayal. It's about control. And Curtis, though wounded and weary, has become the most dangerous kind of enemy, one with nothing left to lose and every reason to fight.